There's the church. That's the St. Ninian's Church of St. Nicholas, and that's what was left of it. A couple of hours later. Germans they advanced fairly quick to our town, because we were so close to the border. So we were under their command pretty well all the time, And even like transportation, like bicycles was the big thing, and they often took them, Food became a very much of an item, because people just didn't have the food. And even on my dad's place, I mean, he had food, but often the Germans came and just helped themselves if there was, if there was animals there that they needed. Or garden, whatever was there, they would just help themselves, and that was quite common. My dad had a radio, and he would listen to the BBC. That's where he got the true story of what was going on. But he would only listen to it for 10 or 15 minutes, and then he had a hole out back in the yard behind the barn that he went and he buried the radio for the rest of the day, and then he'd haul it back out again if he wanted to listen to it, because the rest was all German propaganda. I mean, you couldn't, Hitler was on the radio constantly, or his forces. When it was going on, of course, there was bombs falling, and there was grenades falling. And, every time when something happened, the sirens would go off, and you'd get, you'd have to go and hide somewhere. And usually they were in cellars. People had built underground bunkers, or, to protect themselves. Like in our case, we didn't have a cellar, but what we did have was a windmill. And the windmill was above ground, but it was a big, it was a big hill. That was actually, it wasn't a hill, but it was built. It was an earthen mound. I can remember neighbors, and that there was probably 30 or 40 people in there, at times when these went off, And of course, Mom and Dad always had to tell us, that we had to go there or wherever, that we were in danger, and we didn't think much of it, at the time before, but we soon got used to it. There was bombs. I can remember my brother, we were in a shelter again in the mill one day, and the sirens went off, so we were there, and we were there for quite a while, and my brother I guess he got hungry, and he snuck out of the mill and went down to the house, and he got some bread out and butter and some jam, and he started making himself a sandwich, and then they started shelling, all around, and my mom and dad didn't know where he was at, and they were just terrified. And the next thing they know, here he came running in, and he just, I can still see him running. He ran in so fast, and he ran right into the bags of feed, he was completely out of breath because he was so terrified, And he never did get that sandwich. I mean, we found it afterwards on the kitchen table. It was buttered, and the jam was half on it, but he didn't have the guts to take it with him or eat it, It was left on the table, yeah. The most vivid memories I have are, the last year or so, or a year or two of the war, when things got, more heated and more, there was a lot more action, there was more bombs fell, and there was more grenades and everything, And so in 1944, that was, I guess, about September or October, or maybe it was earlier than that, the Germans came and they took my dad, they rounded up all the men from the town for work camps, So he left, and, Mom was left with us on the farm, of course, and, that was a very trying, very difficult day, I remember, because although I don't know, I think my mom probably told us something totally different than what really happened, that Daddy had to go away, but, we were young, so I mean, it didn't, we believed her, There was no communication, we didn't know, and Mom didn't know where he was at, other than that he was in a work camp for the Germans, And knowing him, she knew that he would try to get out if he could, But by that time, there were six of us, and the baby was probably 3 or 4 months old. And we things got pretty heated there, and they started advancing right through town more and more. And we were, almost in the center, right in the center of the heated fights, between the Allies and the Germans. It was back and forth. So Mom decided that we better leave there, and so she packed up whatever belongings she had. She had a cart for a dog that they filled with clothing and all the belongings, whatever she could put in it. And we had a young girl working for us that was a kind of a nanny. She was about 15 at the time, and she was with us. She'd been with us all along. And Mom took her along with us further inland to family members. So we went about, 24, 25 kilometers to an aunt of my mom's. And that's where we stayed. So, as you can imagine, it wasn't safe. There was bombs falling all around us, and there were houses blowing up, and, it was just horrible. You'd hear these planes coming overhead, and just, the noise they'd make, and, just agony. So we came to this farmhouse after leaving my mother's aunt. And by this time it was late, and, everybody was tired, and, of course, everybody crying for food and everything else, And like I said, Mom had a baby that was 3 months old, and by this time she didn't have any milk for the baby. And, well, she told me afterwards that she was nursing the baby, but just, she couldn't produce milk with this stress on her all the time, And so she told the girl that was with us that she had to go back to her aunt's place to see if she could get some milk and some food, because she was desperate for the baby. After she left, we could hear that, the planes coming over, and this, and the baby was in the carriage, and this girl decided to take us to the bunker. There was a bunker there, so she decided to take us. But she didn't. She took us, and she left the baby in the house, and hoping to go back to it. And we were only in there for a few minutes, and she tried to go back, but she couldn't. And the shells started dropping all around us. And so after it was over, she went back, and the baby she had put the baby in the kitchen in the old farmhouse, and it was right in front of the window. And by some miracle, the damn place just blew up all around the child. And the only thing that she got was scratches from the window that shattered in her baby carriage, and she came out of there alive. Yeah, it was just a miracle. So, of course, she couldn't stay with us and look after us 6 kids, she had to try and get help somewhere. So, again, we started to move further into a small city there. We weren't there very long, and my uncle, who was with the resistance, he showed up all of a sudden, and he found us there. So he took us out of there and took us further north into Holland. He got us to another relative. There was 2 boys, my brother and I. He took us to another place, and to one relative, and my 4 sisters to another relative in this town. And that's where we stayed. And we were there until pretty well the liberation, I guess, or, close to it. And not knowing where my mother was, and the housekeeper that we had, she went back home because she was, she left us there when she knew we were with family. She didn't have to stay. One day we were out playing soccer, my brother and I, and it was a big yard that, like I said, that we were in, and that was fenced off, but there was a gate at one end of it. And I can still see, all of a sudden, here's Mom walking in. Yeah. She found us, and we were reunited. And she had been, she went to get milk, like I said, and of course, this is what she told us afterwards. And she got halfway, and they started shelling. You know, the planes came over, and the bombs were dropping. And she jumped into a ditch, a drainage ditch, you know, to get away from any direct hits. And she had a duffel bag with her, and she had the bottles in there and whatever else stuff she had. And she threw it on the bank, you know. And there was a shell or a piece of shrapnel hit the bag and just shattered every bottle that she had in the bag. But she didn't get scratched, she just got mud on it, you know. That was the only thing. So when that was over, she started walking again. And then she got picked up by the Germans. They found her walking one night, you know, towards her aunt's place. And they took her and put her in a work camp. Or I don't know if it was a work camp, more like a field hospital that she was taken into. And she had to go along with some of the soldiers there and pick up wounded and bring them back to the hospital in a cart, you know. So, but that didn't last all that long, and then, you know, then that area got cleared and she was let go. She went back to her aunt's place, apparently, and then, of course, she was wondering where we were, and she found us. So that was, I would say, probably March or April when all this happened, and then things got better, and we went back to our own village, to the farmhouse, and like I say, we found a house, and there was holes in it from every angle, you know, in the roofs and in the roof and in the, you know, in the side walls. The windows were all out. And in Holland, most houses are built, the barns are attached right to the house, you know. So it was all the same. Everything was shattered, you know. Every day there was a list up at the courthouse of men that had been missing, and you know that there was word that they were coming home, you know. And I can still see Mom going to the courthouse days and days, you know, and to see if my dad's name was on the list. But I don't know how many days she went, but anyway, finally his name was on the list, and sure enough, you know, we were united again, yeah, as a family. Yeah, and Dad he was, like I say, he was picked up and he was put on a work crew building bridges across canals and waterways, and they were housed in a convent in a large, uh, again a large hall, part of the convent. That's where they slept. They didn't have any change of clothes, of course. They were soaking wet every night from working in the water, and they laid on the floor, and it was infested with, you know, bed bugs and everything else. It was horrible, I guess. Anyway, he was there. I don't know how long he was there, but then one day the Germans came and they wanted volunteers. They had to move some furniture from a house to somewhere else. So my dad said to one of the guys with him, he says, you know, we may as well volunteer, because if we don't volunteer, they're going to just take us anyway, so we may as well go. So Dad and him went. And as they were crossing the street, there was there was planes came over and they started shelling the place, and the Germans told him to run, and they didn't. He fell flat on the ground on the pavement and stayed there. And when it was all over, he got up and he ran as fast as he could, and the other guys were after, they were after disappearing. And he ran into some bushes there and in around houses. And he found a house and he knocked on the door and he told them where he was, and they said, come on in. And then they hid him in the basement for I don't know how long, that he stayed there, He didn't dare come out. But anyway, he wasn't harmed, and he was also liberated, the same as all the rest of the people. Well, like I say, I break down every time I cry, and this is, what is it, 70 years ago, and I still have. It's a really, really difficult memories, those days. They're so vivid in your mind that you never forget them.